Welcome to The Game. This is the show where we go play-by-play analyzing the game of politics. Today, we start with the high-stakes trip. We're going to be analyzing Donald Trump in China. What do the new trade deals mean for the economy? What do they mean for the United States, for the job markets, and the markets in general with one of our most probably biggest rival, but also one of our biggest trade partners here in the United States. Then we're going to turn specifically, we're going to do a deep dive into the economy, inflation, into the recent remarks by Jerome Powell. What do these new interest rates mean? What can we forecast for the next quarter coming up? And lastly, Amazon, UPS, FedEx, others have announced that when they're looking at the job market, what role does AI play? But also, what do some of these layoffs mean for the economy? What does it mean for the future of the workforce? And joining me here to talk about these topics is Raul Mas. Raul Mas is an investor, banker, and economist. He is also the host of Dinero y Más, a great show here on Real Media Works. Make sure to check it out. Raul, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, Wally. Thank you for having me, man.
It's great to have you back in. You've been, I think, almost 3 to 4 times here on the show. I do get the opportunity to see your show, Dinero y Más. Anyone trying to keep up with what's going on in the economy, what's going on in the job market or the stock market, it is a recommendation that I give to you guys. It's how I try to stay up to news, but we like having you here because we also like touching these topics as well. So I want to start with the fact that the president was just in an Asia tour. He stopped in places like Japan, trade deals with Vietnam, and then let's zero in on China. Like I mentioned earlier, China is our biggest rival, not just when it comes to economics, but also when it comes to alliances, right? Who are they sort of partnering with? Places like Russia, projects that they're doing across the globe, trying to make inroads, specifically in Latin America. So I think this trip, it was very strategic for the president. I also believe that the fact that he went to China last sends a message. And what I mean by that is that he was able to come into China and say, look, I already did trade deals with Vietnam. We're working together. He was able to say that I visited my ally, Japan. So I think leaving China last, it comes in showing that there's strength. Hey, your neighbors, they're talking to me in this space. So how do you view the trip in general? And then I want to get a little bit into the specifics on what these trade deals mean.
So first, I think it's really, one observation that isn't really politically related, but I got to tell you, man, I mean, I don't know where the president finds this energy because, yes, you're on Air Force One, okay? I mean, granted, you've got, comfortable accommodations, right? But man, I mean, this guy is just like all over the place. I mean, that is a really, really long flight from the United States to Malaysia, okay? He gets off the plane, he's dancing, with the reception people there, whatever. From there, he goes to Japan, he has meetings in Japan, then he goes to South Korea, then he meets with Xi Jinping on the sidelines. I mean, I don't know where this guy, in his mid-70s gets that kind of energy, but it is just remarkable. And I just want to mention that because
there's a time change as well.
And every flight in the Orient is a really long flight. I mean, Malaysia to Japan is a hell of a long flight too. Japan to South Korea, not that long, but there's just the distances are just vast, right? And yes, you're on Air Force One. You've got all the support around you. But man, it's just
but he's working on Air Force One. He did several interviews where he popped into where the press were. So it's not like he's just like secluded in some room.
Exactly, man.
He's engaging with the press. He's making phone calls. He's prepping for these meetings.
Yeah, and you got to say the other thing I would tell you, man. I mean, he's got a great team around him. This guy, Scott Bessent is killing it. Okay, Marco Rubio as well. I mean, he's got all his advisors. Gary Lutnick, I think, was on this trip, Commerce Secretary. I mean, he's bringing the A team, to all of these places. And like you said, they're striking deals, right? Malaysia is the biggest Muslim country in the world with a huge population. You think that's important? Of course it is, okay? You may very well see, troops from Malaysia in Gaza as part of this peacekeeping force eventually, right? So he's working all these deals. The Japanese prime minister, the first female prime minister of Japan, a conservative. Okay, apparently they had very good conversations. Japan critical at this particular point in time because if there's a shooting war breaks out between China and Taiwan or in that region, we have forces deployed in Japan. In fact,
Geographically, they're very strategic to that region.
absolutely. In fact, I've got my grandniece and her husband are in the Air Force, and they fly, out of Tokyo. They're based in Tokyo, the U.S. Air Force Base there. So it's a very important part of the world. And then, of course, he goes to South Korea. They give him a crown. They give him this crown. They give him this medal, right? I'm surprised he didn't put it on his head, And
That would have been
awesome.
Let's be honest. The left would have gone crazy.
That would have gone nuts, man. But I mean, he was very reserved, right? But
Very
every place he goes, people
Yeah.
are like trying to like outdo each other, right? They're
Yeah,
kind
all
of
the
like,
kids.
well, let's see what we can do for this guy. Let's give him medals. Let's nominate him for a Nobel Prize. Let's do this, do that. And it's kind of getting a little bit silly, but I mean, it just shows that the power of the presidency, if used properly, which is I think what Trump is doing, is unbelievable. And I think there's been this desire to see the United States again assert its role as the leader of the world, right? Again, you may not agree with everything the president is doing. You may, in fact, disagree with a lot of the stuff he's doing, but this man's on the move, right? And this man is taking the job seriously, and he's going everywhere. He's trying to, broker peace deals in the Middle East. Hasn't had much success with the Ukraine and Russia yet, but he's working that as well. And as you mentioned, that situation with China is critical. Why? Because if you look at one of the things that's happened as a result of this whole trade war with China, right? And we saw it in April, right? It started in April, Trump started breaking shit right and left.
It got up to 50%, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, right now, it's actually it's now down to 46%. I think is the latest. The latest after this meeting, it's down to 46%. So, but he started breaking everything, and now he's like putting it all back together. We're sort of realizing that these tariffs of 150%, it was bluster, right? It wasn't going to be long lasting. It was just a negotiating tool on the part of President Trump. It's the art of the deal, right? Which he talks about in his book, and it's worked because all these countries have come to the table. They've negotiated deals. I had a fellow the other day that I spoke to, who's like a trade expert, because I really wanted to get into what's been going on. I mean, has this worked or not? And one of the things that was interesting was China is no longer our number one trading partner.
Interesting.
As a result of all this, now Mexico is our largest trading partner in the world. Okay, now
how do you measure that, if I may ask? Is that because of how much we import, or is it a combination of import export?
It's looking at both, right? I mean, how much we're selling over there, how much is coming over here, and everything has to, when it leaves China, it has to go through like customs duties on the way out. And when it comes here, it comes in through, import duties and all that stuff. So there's actually like physical records both in China and in the US of what's going out, what's coming in, et cetera, et cetera. And this guy who's like a real, he's a great guy, a little bit nerdy, but that's what he does. He just delves into the numbers.
Yeah.
And he comes up with these, great like pie charts and stuff. And one of the things that he mentioned to me, he says, look, China's no longer a number one trading partner. Now it's Mexico, Laredo, the inland port of Laredo. That's where all this stuff is coming in. Now, the caveat to that was, we don't know if they've really stopped being our number one trading partner. There has been, a lot of fundamental changes. But the feeling is that there's still a lot of stuff from China coming into the U.S., but it's coming in through Vietnam. It's coming in through some other. I mean, you should never underestimate the ability of bad actors or even good actors who want to sort of continue to sell their goods. To do so, right? I mean, the world is a big place. There's lots of different ways to do commerce. There's free trade zones all over the world where you can ship stuff to, kind of repackage it and re-export it from there, and it comes in here no longer as something from China, but something from a third country, right?
Singapore, Vietnam,
so I think you're seeing a lot of that, and I think my friend would agree that yes, there's probably a lot of that has taken place, right?
Rubio has actually talked about the need to kind of nail that down, because there were, when it comes to these tariffs, it's not just a blanket tariff on everything. They range percentages based on what it is. Semiconductors, which there's a big conversation here in the United States. There was the CHIPS Act a couple years ago, and we understand that semiconductors are such an important technology. AI and to really all things when it comes to the future of tech in the United States. And Rubio was talking that one of the ways that China does cheat is they know there are some tariffs that we have that are a little bit larger. They do move them to other country.
Yeah.
They do the repackaging and then they bring them here. But and not to get too off of China, but I do think with Latin America, there's such an opportunity.
Yeah.
If we're trying to take that commerce power away from China, because we understand that commerce power allows them to leverage power in other areas, in other spaces. But Latin America is primed, I think, to be that ally for us.
I agree with you, man.
Economically,
I agree
it's
with
our
you.
region.
I think, MAGA should be not just, making America great. I think it should be making the Americas great, right? I mean, bring in Central America, bring South. I think there's incredible opportunities there. But getting back to this, so yeah, I think that's going on. But again, think about this, man. I mean, the amount of global trade, just the sheer quantity of stuff that goes across borders is so overwhelming, okay? We don't have the ability to inspect every single cargo shipment coming from Asia. I mean, it's a lot of it. Yeah, there's, occasional inspections, spot inspections here. But we're not opening every box coming from the Orient coming into the U.S. There's a lot of stuff that's going to come through.
Yeah.
And unless we're willing to, triple the size of our, import inspectors or quadruple them or whatever.
I don't see that.
We're not, and it's going to slow down the trade and stuff. I mean, so it's really, you have to kind of rely on what the importers and exporters are telling you. Now, could they be lying?
Possibly. Yeah.
Of course. I mean, a lot of things can happen, right? But yes, I mean, the good thing about this meeting is that I think it got things back on track, okay? Although, I don't know if you saw that image of Trump, shaking, Xi Jinping's hand. I mean, Trump was smiling and he was talking to the press. Xi Jinping looked like, he had just eaten like a sour lemon or something. I mean, the guy was not smiling. He was very poker-faced. I don't know, the body language told me that, yes, they reached an agreement, but, Trump is making a big deal about it. This is great. We're going to have access to rare earth minerals again. Yeah. We're going to let NVIDIA sell some chips to the Chinese. We've kind of smoking the peace pipe type of stuff. Things are back on track. And I don't think, just again, looking at the body language, and I'm not a body language expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I think when I saw that, it was just kind of like, okay, Trump is making this out to be a huge success.
Yeah.
Xi Jinping is just very poker-faced. And so any agreement, the Chinese, they tell you one thing and, 6 months later they're doing something else, right? They change it. They don't agree. They don't enforce it, or they do enforce it. Trump made a big deal about the fact that he got China to finally cut back on the raw materials used to produce fentanyl, right? Because what they do is they ship these chemical precursors in large quantities to Mexico and other countries, and in those laboratories, that's where they make the fentanyl. So they've had over the years periods where China has cracked down, but again, I mean, I think one of the things that we are prone to do as individuals looking at this, we overestimate the ability of modern nation states to control these things. And the fact of the matter is, man, I mean, you can't. The genie's out of the bottle. If you, if you look at how vast international commerce has become, we've got planes. I mean, huge fleets. I mean, look here in Miami. I mean, look at the airport here. We got LATAM Air. We have Atlas Air. These huge cargo freighters, 747s traveling around the world. Moving stuff constantly, the port of Miami, the port of LA, all these, ports that are off, just round the clock offloading stuff. The nation state really can't control its borders the way it did, 50, 60 years ago. Why? Because now money transfers are instantaneous. You can get on an airplane, you can go halfway across the world, cross a border, relatively easily. Technology now. Crypto, right, is making it difficult now for even central banks to control the movement of monies, right? So the world has changed, and the ability of the modern nation state to control its own borders has diminished a great deal. I mean, obviously, Trump has reinforced the southern border with troops to physically keep people out. Okay, you can keep people out. If you want to shut merchandise from coming in, you can do that as well, at your own peril. But, can you really keep money? Can you keep technology? Can you keep people from, that want to come here?
From the changes and what the president has done in relation to Asia, do you see something that is going to be, that we're going to see beyond the Trump years? Because I think one difference between the United States and a place like China, a government in China, the regime there, is that they think in 10, 20, 30, even 50 years, one, they govern for that long, right? Yeah. You'll have the same president or leader for, unlimited time. And the same thing with their governing body. So while Trump, I think, needs to almost do a victory lap, I'm not saying that it's not, that he shouldn't. I'm just saying he might be so focused on highlighting what was done now because he is thinking possibly about the midterms or he's thinking about his legacy. He understands that he has a limited time as president.
You're absolutely right, Wadia. I mean, the Chinese absolutely think differently. They think in terms of centuries. We think in terms of, next quarter for our earnings, right? That type of stuff. The U.S. mentality, very short term, very transaction oriented. Chinese are looking at the long game. Now, that being said, the Chinese are not 12 feet tall and titans, and yes, what they have done with their economy, and I've been there and seen it over the past 20, 25 years, is mind-boggling, right? I mean, you go to these cities that Shanghai is just huge modern metropolis. Incredible highways, rapid transit systems, bullet trains. I mean, airports that are like unbelievable, right? I mean, the infrastructure is really something to sort of say, wow, what they've done here and how they've done it in such a quick period of time is unbelievable. But they've got their own share of problems, right? They've had a real estate bubble that they've created. A lot of people in China and Hong Kong have made tons of fortunes on real estate, but that's been basically with the government handing out free money. Now you've got all these empty, buildings throughout China.
Even smaller cities that have been built, expecting populations to move, and they haven't.
So you have these empty cities practically. You still have a lot of people in rural areas that are, literally millions and millions of people that have not entered that, haven't moved to the urban centers and joined the capital creation that's occurred. And so the Chinese are always looking over their shoulder because they know that, if they start having problems employing their population, and keeping them employed and happy and pacified because they can put food on the table. If that starts to change for China, that is not something.
It's a big problem, I think.
For the regime, because you could suddenly have demonstrations and whatnot. And one thing that China can't do to this day is feed itself on its own accord, right? So. They're importing, these last couple of months, and that was the other thing that Trump did on this trip as part of this agreement. The Chinese have now agreed to start buying soy again from American farmers. The American farmers were shut out. Remember a couple of weeks ago, he was saying we're going to have to give a $10 billion lifeline, right? The Brazilians and the Argentines were sending soy to China in its place, right? But China needs food, and the breadbasket of the world to this day remains the United States of America. I mean, we produce, soy, wheat, corn. The Chinese own Smithfield, which is one of the biggest pork producers here. They bought it, years ago. A lot of that pork goes to China to feed the population. They have a huge fleet of fishing fleets that go all over the world, literally raping the oceans to feed their people with fish and whatnot. So the Chinese can't feed themselves. And that is not something that they can solve overnight, right?
That's going to take time.
So they have other sources of foodstuffs, right, like Brazil, like Argentina. They realize that. They don't necessarily, just like we don't want to depend on them for raw earth minerals, they don't want to depend on us for, soy and other things that they need to feed their people. So you're seeing absolutely an alignment, a realignment taking place here. The trade in the world is changing. And those effects are going to be much longer term, way beyond the presidency of Donald Trump. And I think, quite frankly, I think we've talked about this before, Wally. It's a good thing, right? I mean, yes, the idea that we have this trading relationship with China in general has been a positive thing, right? China is not the adversary that it was, 30, 40 years ago. We've established deep financial ties with them. We have both gained from the relationship, but they've also taken the fact that we helped them come into the world trade community, and they've used that money not just to become an economic power, but also to become a military power.
Very much.
Right? And they are very much trying to, the hawks in this country will tell you, well, they're trying to supersede us, maybe, okay, but they certainly want to be, the powerful force in their part of the world. They want to dominate the Asia Pacific region. That's their backyard, right? They haven't come out with their version of actually, they have come out with their version of the Monroe Doctrine, which is much different because what they've done is they've built these artificial islands all over the South China Sea, and they've claimed that, this is our territory. The whole South China Sea, belongs to them. And the U.S. and Australia and the U.K., we've all pushed back. We continue to send Navy warships through the South China Sea, passing in front of these islands and, completely ignoring the fact that the Chinese are claiming sovereignty around them. But they're trying to become the regional powerhouse. And that's why people say it's inevitable that, they supposedly want to take over Taiwan militarily by the end of this decade. So, we're very, worried about that. I don't think it would be that easy, man. I mean, even though it's just a short distance from Taiwan to the mainland, the Taiwanese have learned a lot of lessons from what's been going on, in Ukraine. They have a lot of support from the Israeli military. They have a lot of high quality, U.S. Fighter jets and naval, weapons and stuff like that. It would be ugly, right? And I don't think China's ready to go there. But there is this tension, okay? There's absolutely this tension going on between the two countries.
Very much so. I think it's fascinating always to study and look at China because not just in the short term, but in the long term, it is our economies are tied together, which I think is a good segue actually into our second topic, that we do want to look at the recent news on inflation, interest rates, the economy in general, the job market. This week, Jerome Powell, at the same time that the president is in China, Jerome Powell gave his press conference, which is typical after the Fed comes out with news or after their meeting. They did announce, if I'm not mistaken, a 25 base cut on interest, which a lot of folks in different industries do like to point out the benefits of that, real estate being one of those major credit cards, loans, etc. People talk about what's good, but at the same time, many folks are pointing to the fact that while he did deliver good news on a small interest cut, he did at the same time kind of put cold water, as we were talking, on that good news, pointing to the fact that they said are lacking data to be able to make possible predictions for the future or recommendations going into fourth quarter. What's your thoughts on just what we're seeing from Jerome Powell? And look, when we talk about President Trump and we talk about his team, right? Marco Rubio when it comes to foreign policy, Besant. The Secretary of Commerce as well. I mean, he just has such a team around him. I know that the Fed chair is very different. It wasn't nominated by Trump, but it's not someone that he fully controls. Do you think Jerome Powell could be a more strategic partner to the president in this economy, or is he kind of doing his job in that space?
Look, I think the good news is Jerome Powell's not going to be around much longer. His term expires now in May, so he's a short timer, and he realizes that. Trump has famously called him, too late Powell, right? And I think it's a great, Trump is great at giving everybody like a nickname, right? And I think too late Powell is absolutely spot on, because he was too late to raise interest rates when we were seeing, inflationary pressures building up, and now he's, in my mind, lagging, right? And I think Powell has this mentality that all this stuff that we're talking about, we really haven't seen the effects of the tariffs yet. Well, wait a second. This tariff war started back in April. Okay, here we are now. It's almost the end of the year. All right. Have we seen dramatic, increases in the prices of imports wherever we go? Not really. Okay, and there have been these tariff increases, but what's happening is in many cases the exporters are eating them. They're saying, okay, I'm going to cut my profit margin because I don't want to lose market share, or the middleman, the importer, is absorbing them. Okay, but the reality is, and I'm the one that does the shopping in my house, man, and I freely admit sometimes I go to Walmart. Okay, and when I walk through the store, there is still an awful lot of huge 60-inch televisions selling for $300. Okay, they haven't gone up to 400 or 500 or 600. Right now, there are some things. I mean, you got to realize, man. I mean, we see it here in town, man. I mean, you go around. Lunch is now a heck of a lot more expensive than it was, a year ago, a year and a half ago. I don't think that's necessarily on Trump's account. That started during the Biden administration. And reversing inflation is something that's very hard to do. What the president's trying to do is put a cap on it getting any worse, right? And right now, we're still not there. Inflation is running about 3% on an annualized basis. The Fed's own target has historically been 2%. So we're not there yet, right? So, and I think, but getting back to Powell, I think he has this fear of, well, gee, the tariffs is really going to accelerate inflation. No, wait a second. It's been 6 months now, 7 months, whatever. What are you talking about, right? And I think that, there's this excuse that, well, the government shut down, we don't really know what's going on. He knew the president was also in China negotiating, a major trade deal. Not in China, he was actually in South Korea, but he was in China meeting with Xi Jinping. In South Korea, right on the sidelines. It was a short meeting, actually. It lasted like 45 minutes or so. But, he knew that the president's over there doing all these trade deals. And to come out and basically say, well, we can't guarantee that we're going to lower rates again in December, knowing full well that the markets have already kind of priced that in from here to year end. Everybody's assuming that rates are going to be down 0.75% by the end of the year. The 0.25% that they raised in October, the 0.25%, in September, the 0.25% now, and then they don't meet in November, but they'll meet again in December, and another 0.25% in December. So it'll be 0.75% between September and the end of the year. Now he's saying, well, it might only be 0.5%, right? And I just think that was completely unnecessary to sort of throw that. I mean, I refer to it as a bucket of cold water on the markets. I mean, yes, the markets have been, they've reached record highs on the Dow, on the S&P 500, on the NASDAQ. They're all at record highs. The valuations are probably out of control. But, the president is trying to grow this economy. And look at these deals that he's doing all over the world, bringing back billions and billions of dollars of direct investment. Okay, it's not going to happen overnight. Okay, but he is preparing this country, and you've already seen it in the growth numbers. Okay, the GDP growth numbers are now much higher than what Biden had during his administration, and they're on a track to continue to sort of increase. Right, so I saw I forget who it was. I was listening to some other economist, talking on TV or something, and he was saying, listen, if you're producing, if you're an apple producer, your business is producing apples, and you're producing a heck of a lot more apples, okay? You used to produce 1,000 apples, now you're producing 5,000 apples. That doesn't mean the price of apples is going to go up. It means the price of apples is going to go down, right? And so his point was that if the American economy is growing, okay, and we're bringing in all this investment, and it's heating up because of the right reasons, because we're growing the economy, okay? then you shouldn't look at that as necessarily being inflationary. That's a good thing. I mean, there's going to be more products. Now, the other thing you talked about is, or I think we're going to talk about was jobs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the job market is murky. I think that's the best way to describe it. Think about what's been going on this past year. I mean, we've gotten rid of literally hundreds of thousands of people that were here illegally. Okay, that has kind of like upset the job market because let's face it, these people, a lot of them were employed. They might have been employed under a fake Social Security number or whatever. Now they're being laid off. Companies, I think, are very reluctant to, and they've come out and said this publicly, they're reluctant to, hire more people because they don't know the impact of artificial intelligence and what's going on. Do I really need to continue to hire this many people? The competition remains fierce in the marketplace. They are still a little bit concerned about tariffs and whether, in fact, at the end of the day, maybe not this year, but next year, they might see some, a hangover from all the stuff that happened this year, for a tariff hangover, okay, that we haven't seen it yet. Maybe we'll see it in 6 months' time. So businesses are kind of nervous. They're saying that their stock markets, multiples are at record highs, and that's probably not going to be sustainable, indefinitely. So they're reluctant to hire, and they're looking at doing more AI and doing more of these things.
Is this why? So we talked about this about a month or two ago. The Wall Street Journal had the survey. They do it almost yearly on what people believe the American dream is. Is it alive? Is it still reachable? And many of the numbers were kind of historically low.
Yes.
Where folks kind of felt it was more difficult to reach the American dream. But at the same time, you're seeing high records of people making money through the stock market.
Yeah.
I know you can't measure everyone's wealth that way.
Yeah,
but there is this notion that the economy isn't where it needs to be, right? That the last 4 years under Biden were good. There's some favorability with Trump coming in, but I think a lot of people still feel that they haven't seen the 4 years where we saw Trump, where record of home buying happened between 2016 to 2020, specifically among Latinos. Record employment, labor force participation. Is that why folks there is that notion of things aren't where they used to be because of the job market specifically?
Yeah, I think so. And I think part of the problem here is, and the Wall Street Journal just did an article about this, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday. The beneficiaries of what's going on in the stock market are old farts like me, right? I mean, that have money saved up, of, a nest egg, whatever, or our home values have gone up. My little 3-bedroom house is now worth $1 million something or whatever. Yeah. But younger generations are struggling, right? I mean, your generation, finding, a house that you can afford, and now, interest rates, the mortgage rates are still high. It's gotten really tough, man. I mean, I don't envy, Generation Z, generation, whatever the
X, Gen
whatever.
Z,
Gen X, whatever. I mean, they are facing a hard time. Precisely what you talked about. I mean, the jobs aren't there. There's another article about, listen, young kids, and the Wall Street Journal article was saying, here they have a child who graduated, from a great university. Marketing degree, is having a really hard time. She's still living at home with her parents. Her parents are doing really well because their home is worth a lot more money. They've got money saved up, but she's struggling. She did, quote unquote, all the right things, and yet is having a hard time finding a job. And I think, corporations are naturally, it's not that they don't want to hire these people. It's like, okay, they understand there's this technological revolution taking place, AI around the corner. Do we really want to hire all these people now and then find out 6 months from now that we have to lay them off because there's a new program that's come out that can replace all of them? And that's what you saw with Amazon. Amazon announced, 14,000, layoffs.
Yeah.
Why? Because if you think about, a lot of what Amazon does is it fills orders, right? It has these warehouses. The warehouses are actually pretty automated, right? But now a lot of the ordering, a lot of the, sales tracking, analysis, all that stuff can be done by
I'm glad you
AI.
bring that point up, because I think it was Fortune, they did an article kind of looking at what were these jobs. and it wasn't the kind of floor factory worker,
Right.
right? A lot of that is automated, but there
Right.
are folks that are kind of working in that space. But a lot of it was that kind of middleman,
Right.
the people doing the analysis, the people doing the projecting and the budgeting in Amazon. These kind of middle management roles where I think that's where AI is really going to come in. These folks who used to do all the Excel spreadsheets of forecasting,
Yeah.
AI can come in and do that in seconds.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, the whole business of selling stuff has just changed so dramatically, right? I mean, who goes to a department store anymore? Who goes to a shopping center, right? Most of Amazon's sales are online,
Yeah,
right?
it's on the phone, on the app.
It's on the app, et cetera, et cetera. All that data is collected and saved in the cloud, okay? If AI can now come in and in a much faster and efficient manner, and it is doing it, it's doing it already, analyzing all those, incredible sales that Amazon has by region, I mean, down to the nth degree of detail, and do it instantaneously, much faster than an army of, marketing specialists can look at and do pie charts and stuff, right? Then why do you need those people, right?
Yeah.
So I think anybody who's getting into a job that historically has done a lot of, Excel spreadsheets or data collection, I mean, there's going to be, and I think we have to accept it, Wadi. We can't live in the past. We can't be, Luddites, right? We have to accept the fact that we are now going through yet another technological revolution, at least in my lifetime. The first technological revolution that I saw, in the early 90s was the personal computer, right? The personal computers came around, right? Microsoft, IBM, all this stuff. And suddenly, who needed secretaries anymore? Businesses used to have huge secretarial pools where you would go and take your handwritten notes and hand it to the typing pool so they could type it up into a document. That happened in my lifetime, right? I mean, I remember, having to do memos, and then I'd give it to somebody, it would go to the typing pool, and I'd get it back 2 or 3 days later. That's like insane these days, right?
Yeah.
I mean, now, you
AI
type something.
will auto-generate during your meeting on Teams.
Right,
on
exactly.
Zoom.
I mean, now you don't even have to go back and type your notes on Microsoft Word. It does it for you, right?
Yeah.
So the point was we had personal computers, or the power of computers and all that stuff in the 90s. Then we had at the beginning of this century the whole revolution with the internet and cell phones, right? I mean, you now have in your hand more computing power than the Apollo spacecraft that took astronauts to the moon back in the 1960s, right? So that changed. That's a second sort of huge technological, or maybe 2 or 3, depending if you want to break it up: internet, cell phones, and now you're having this whole AI thing, right? And people are saying, well, eventually, I mean, Elon Musk, I think, came out that workers in general are going to be obsolete, right? That people aren't going to have to work anymore because AI will do everything and we'll have robots. Look, I mean, I don't buy that yet. I mean, Elon's a very smart guy. But I got to tell you, man, we are getting closer and closer to that era where, a lot of the traditional jobs are going to be replaced by, automated systems and bots and, whatever, right? Look at how the military is changing, right? I mean, I saw something, the Army, is pretty much come to the conclusion that having people flying helicopters is like,
you can do drones now. You can
It's
do
all
automated.
drones.
Someone in Nevada,
Yeah.
it's sort of almost like a video game.
yeah. Building tanks. I mean, you look at the Ukraine-Russian war where tanks, extremely expensive tanks are being blown up by, cheap drones, that figure out a way to, put a shaped charge and right at, between the hull and the turret. And, that's revolutionizing that whole industry, right? I mean, so I think we are on the verge of an entirely new era where, yes, the nature of work is going to change. A lot of jobs will be lost. I think we're already starting to see that. And so that's also adding to this uncertainty and adding to, well, the jobs aren't there anymore. What do we do to employ these people, right?
Yep.
And, And Elon Musk has talked about the need for like a universal basic income, right? Because of the fact that we're heading in that direction.
Sam Altman also at OpenAI
Sam Altman's talked about that, right? So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
It's an interesting topic, and it reminds me of a quote that says, one thing is to predict the rain, the other thing is to build the ark.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're at a point where many people are predicting the rain. They're predicting that AI is going to, like you mentioned, we're on the verge of a complete change of probably how the workforce operates.
Yeah.
So I think people are trying to figure out, okay, what's the arc that I need to build? Either what are the skill sets that I need to incorporate? Look, as conservatives, the universal basic income has always been something that's like completely off the table. It is interesting, though, how Sam Altman and Elon have talked about it in the sense of you're going to have so many people displaced. And they're talking, I think, very much long-term, not necessarily, this year or next year or anything around the corner, but that you're going to have so much displacement, but that displacement is also going to come with so much profits that these corporations and people are going to be making, that there is going to be almost like a avenue for that. Again, very complicated conversation, which is very interesting to at least have the conversation.
And again, we sort of saw that, back in the Industrial Revolution, right? When steam power came about, right? And all of these factories that were in the UK back then, where, the UK was a center of manufacturing, a lot of those workers got displaced because now, steam engines and, you're beginning of new technologies. The Industrial Revolution changed employment dramatically. We're going now not through an industrial, I guess a technological revolution that will probably see more jobs displaced than what we saw but guess what? The population didn't go away. Humans didn't cease to exist.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see us becoming like, quasi cybernetic, robots in the near future, fused with robots or whatever. But
as a society, we'll learn to adjust. I think that's why the conversation right now is important. Raul, I do want to thank you for being on the show today.
Man,
always very insightful to
Did we miss anything? Did we
topics.
Miss any topics?
No, because we actually just merged right into the AI kind of job market thing, which I think, again, people are really having these conversations.
Yeah.
They're thinking through them. I was talking to my cousin. He works in the hotel industry, and he works actually in the sort of the data collection and forecasting, budget forecasting. They look at where the economies are growing, where populations are changing, and what kind of investments these hotels should be making in those regions. He talked about how the team now, they're receiving AI training. And as they're receiving the training, they're like, man, there are things that in the future, in 5 years, they're not going to need me. So how do I adjust? Yeah. How do I make sure that I'm one of the individuals that knows how to use this technology so I don't get displaced? So they actually say, hey, we want to leverage this individual more.
And what you mentioned is very important, lifelong learning, man. Don't just think that, hey, I went to high school, college. Yeah. No, I got to adapt, man.
100%.
Otherwise, adapt or die.
Yeah.
Right? That's the motto.
Build
adapt
the ark.
Or die.
Let's make sure that we're a generation that builds the ark. Raul, thank you again for being here on the show, and thank you to our audience again for tuning in. This has been The Game, the show where we go play by play, analyzing the game of politics. We'll see you here next time.
Boom. Damn, that was fast.